Thank you. We're here to tell a very sad story, a very outrageous story, but it's also a story of love. It's the love of Bassel Khartabil, free internet activist for the free culture, and the love of the free culture community for Bassel. Bassel was a free internet activist, and he has been detained in Damascus in 2012. And his name has been deleted from the prison's register in 2015, and since then there is no information about his current status or whereabouts. So what we want to talk about today is his love for free culture, and I think today in this there's a lot of spaces where people talk about the value of free culture, of open source, of open science, etc. And we are also committed to this cause, so we take this as a given. But today we also want to call awareness to the costs that living and loving free culture may bring to some of us. So really the focus of the Free Bassel campaign that we want to talk about today is to bring the attention of the people to the Free Bassel hashtag, the freebassel.org website, where you can check out news. It's constantly updated of the status of Bassel and the campaign, and especially the campaign letter. We would be honored if you add your name to the campaign to Free Bassel. Melanie is a researcher at the CNRS Institute in Paris, and she's also a founding member of Creative Commons in France. And she will talk a little bit more about the Free Bassel movement that she's been part of for many years. I haven't had the chance to meet Bassel, but I know a lot of people who did. And I facilitated a book sprint with a lot of people from the Free Bassel, movement and the free culture community. Right after the news got out that Bassel disappeared from prison. And so the campaign came together, and one of the many activities that they did was a book sprint that talked about the cost of living and loving free culture. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So the book on the right is the one that we did when he disappeared from prison. But Bassel himself participated in a book sprint in 2011, which was initiated here by Transmediale and by Booksprint's founder Adam Hyde for an open web, which is this one. And there's a nice quote about his contribution to that book. Back from 2011, Adam Hyde wrote, "Most of us were confused by the proliferation of the term open web, since any discourse of the net has abused both terms over the last decade. None of us really knew what open was anymore, or what it meant these days by the web. What then was the open web? Bassel Safadi, contributing remotely from Syria, gave us a clue. He outlined a stack of conditions that would lead him to agree to a web service being identified as open. Then the conversation turned to mapping the idea onto a book structure." So this was in 2011, and then when the terrible news got out that Bassel disappeared from prison, many of his friends and free culture activists came together for another book sprint to speak of the cost of freedom that we will look at a little bit later. But first, just to quickly show you, this is Bassel. We want to show you a really quick video, 1 minute, introducing Bassel, and then Melanie is going to talk about his contribution to the free culture movement and the Free Bassel campaign. Let's see how this works.
Hi, my name is John Phillips, and I'm Bassel Khartabil's best friend. Immediately when I met him, in his nice, soft-spoken Syrian classical Arabic accent, I knew that he was a gentle, free soul.
Khartabil.
If you've heard of me at all, it's probably because you've heard of Wikipedia, which I set up. The current case that I'm really campaigning for is the case of Bassel. He was a Wikipedia volunteer.
يوم الصبح بفتح فيسبوك بفتح التويتر بشوف شو في حدا عم يحكي عن باسل، شو في حدا عم يحس بباسل من قلبي، باسمي باسم باسل، باسم عائلة باسل وعائلتي. كثير شكرا.
All right, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about the different movements of free culture in which Bassel has been involved for many years. And so the purpose of this part of the presentation is to highlight the fact that the campaign in favor of his liberation and raising of awareness about his work is as multimedia as his engagement are. So, for instance, he's been part of the Creative Commons community that has been mentioned. He founded a hacker lab in Damascus. He was also instrumental in doing 3D reproduction of Palmyra city many years ago, and the work has been picked up by other developers, other artists concerned with preservation of heritage. Wikipedia, font library, Fabricators, Mozilla, so many movements. So the first Free Bassel Day took place on March 15, 2013. It was organized by friends of Bassel, and mostly John Phillips, who you saw in the movie, has been very active, and so that was the start of an international campaign with many events happening in many cities at the same time. People would just gather and organize something. So, for instance, in Paris, we organized a meeting in a Syrian restaurant, and we came with a newspaper because we had an op-ed published about free culture and Bassel. Other examples of parts of this campaign in different media, a cookbook. So you can download it and you can cook a dish. So of course everything is under an open license or in the public domain. His friends have been putting posters on the street. So that one is in Amsterdam. So a lot of graphical work, also collaborative translations of articles. Two journalists have been commissioned to lead an investigation about Bassel in Syria and in Palestine. One, Stéphanie Vidal, wrote the article in French, and then members of the various communities have been translating the article in many different languages. Also, in The Guardian, you can find an interesting article. Another example is, so that was last year. In March, a picnic So every year, the movement organized specific events. And what else? Logo, a design competition. And recently, there has even been a paper co-authored by Hong Wang, who did her PhD with a friend of Bassel. So she studied with her co-author the campaign and the organization on Twitter with the hashtag Free Bassel, which after Bassel was disappeared from prison was seconded by another hashtag, Where is Bassel? And last but not least, the book sprint is another example of collaboration among Bassel's friends and friends of friends.
So this happened just a few weeks after the news got out that he disappeared from prison. And 44 contributors came together to contribute to this book. 12 people were actually in the book sprint in France during 5 days, writing, editing, compiling the book. And many people participated remotely. So by contributing paintings, poems, theoretical treatises, polemical pieces, and very personal reflections. All of them very committed to the free culture movement, but also taking a critical look at sort of what have been their personal costs and what have been the costs of the movement. In a very humble way, because of course most of the people who contributed did so in freedom. They didn't have to pay a price as high as Bassel did. But they still looked at problems as loneliness, burnout, exploitation, and also the fact that they were missing friends who had been disappeared because of their participation in the movement. So we want to read a few quotes from the book to you, but we would also like to know what your perspective is, sort of what have been your experiences, what are the reasons that you love free culture, open source, open science, open education, etc., and what costs have you seen or personally experienced? So what we would like to do by the end of the session is having a wall for the Free Bassel campaign and take some nice photos. And we would like to ask you to write down sort of one word, a sentence about what you love about free culture, and then another post-it with something that maybe, you know, a cost that you experienced or something that you've seen happening. So maybe you can just pass these around.
What were the two things?
So one thing you love about free culture and one thing that a cost of participating or living free culture that you've experienced. Can I just give these to you and you can pass them on?
And then maybe we can paste them all on a wall, and then we'll take a photo, and it will feed the website of the campaign. I highlighted specific events, but of course there are more things happening on a very regular basis.
Mm-hmm. So just take a minute to write it down, and then maybe once you leave the room, you can paste it on the wall, so we don't have to get up, all of us now. And we'll also read a few. Don't worry, it's not going to be a long, boring reading. We'll just read a few short quotes of what some of the contributors in the book wrote about their personal experiences. Melanie also contributed a chapter to the book, so we'll start with one of her quotes.
So I didn't suffer any costs by participating to the free culture movement. So writing a short piece for this book was the opportunity to reflect on my privilege. And in the contrary, contributing to this movement brought me very close friends and colleagues and a partner. And I really had to think hard about which social cost, and it was just that at some meeting I would have lunch alone, discussing copyright. So that was the only the only cost, but my only social cost has been exclusion by conservative people from whom I needed neither approval nor friendship.
Another contributor, Mouchon Seraviv, wrote, freedom of information, much like freedom of markets, doesn't naturally lead to the kind of freedom we hope for in society. In fact, in the past decade, since the rise of the free culture movement, we've seen many costs, such as time, attention, and education, shifting to the side of the content creators. While financial profit is centralized by the data-hoarding internet giants that enjoy the reputation of information liberators. So he goes on to say, Google, for example, is considered a great patron of free culture, whereas in practice it cannibalizes the free culture that it monetizes, offsetting the costs of culture from those consuming it and profiting them from those creating it, and that is us.
Shauna Gordon McKeon writes, we live in alarming times. Even the computers with which we create these digital gifts are made too often by people trapped in abusive conditions, using processes that blight our primal commons, the global environment. We must advocate for the commons in all of its forms, digital, social, economic, environmental, before the cost of freedom becomes too high to bear.
Then we have a short quote from John Wilbanks, who writes, there is also a cost within the movement, one we don't talk about much. When we do actually all get together, and for once we're not transgressing against the rest of the people in the room, the ones who don't want to sit with you to talk about copyright at lunch, we have a nasty habit of judging each other, fighting each other over details that the rest of the world doesn't even recognize.
Ginger Kuhn. In all of the free cultural work I've done over the last 6 years, one of my most pervasive anxieties has been the feeling that I work in public, that everyone is always looking over my shoulder, or could be if they wanted to. It's a difficult feeling to come to terms with, even if it's based on one of the most potent and valuable principles of free culture, transparency.
Then the next quote is from Lorna Campbell, who's been working in open education. And she says, I am not by nature a very open person. My inclination is always to remain closed. I have had to learn openness, and I'm not sure I'm very good at it. It's a continual learning experience. When we step or are pushed outside our boundaries and institutions, it's easy to feel disoriented and insecure.
I did not feel free when I had to publish my first book with a commercial press. Few people can actually read the book now because it's so expensive. I signed away the copyright as the price for a job. In an ideal world, I would have published this openly. Martin Paul Eve.
And now we're coming to the last quote, before we want to hear from you. A quote by Adam Haidt, who says, I find myself, after all this time immersed in free culture, amazed at my holding on to some form of the proprietary way of thinking. There is no purity on the path to freedom. Walking through the shameful path of not meeting the high bar we've set ourselves to avoid proprietary life, I keep learning about how deeply embedded it is in our daily lives. I keep examining it, and it keeps surprising me. I keep discarding it. There's still a long way to go. So does any of you want to share some of the thoughts that you wrote down? Or maybe you didn't write down?
Or should we give you a little minute of break? Do we have time before the next session?
If you'd let me know what time it is.
15.
Anyone who does want to share?
I think we have like 2-3 minutes if you want to share, or maybe we just like post the things together. Yeah, somebody's
Okay.
starting already.
Thank you.
That's
First
great.
post it.
Perfect.
And then that would be also nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. Before you leave, just leave them on the wall and we can take a picture of that. So, I mean, just to wrap it up, you can download the book for free at costoffreedom.cc. You can sign the petition if you want to help the campaign. There are 2 petitions, one on change.org and one at freebassel.org. And there's also another book that we want to point your attention to by Bassel's wife, Nora. It's a collection of poems that she wrote to him while he was in prison. And you can buy it at waitingforbassel.cc. So all of this would help the campaign. And of course, the post-its on the wall would also be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.